within about 6 weeks, I was a national figure. As a publisher, nobody knew who I was. How many people do you think look at the name of a book that's been published?
Very rare.
Very few. They don't know whether the book's published by Scribner's or Harper's or Double A or Random House. What do they care? They want to know what's in the book and who wrote it. What difference does it make who published it? But even when I started writing books, some people knew my name. They didn't know what I looked like. But after you've been on a national television show for a little while, a very popular one like Watch My Line, everybody knew me. No matter where I went, people would yell, "Hey, Bennett!" Truck drivers would stop and yell. Every taxi driver knew me. And I loved it. Anybody who says he doesn't like it, I think is a liar. It's very nice.
Did you begin to get fan mail?
Oh, by the autographed pictures and people coming up for autographs and stuff. I never knew this would happen. And don't forget, I'd been married to a movie star briefly, and it burned when they pushed me aside to get her autographs. So it was kind of fun to be the center, and I loved it.
Well, you said you were going to tell a story on Dorothy Kilgallen, I think.
Well, the next person who disappeared from this show was Mr. Hal Block. He was the only one who needed it. This is the unfortunate part of it. Arlene was a well-known actress and had a radio show around, still has. John Daly was the head of ABC's news department, well-known man. I was a fairly successful publisher already, let's not kid around, a very successful publisher. And so there we were. But Hal Block needed Watch My Line. That was his only job. So he was the one who was tense and nervous, and a very vulgar fellow. And he continuously said things he shouldn't have said. And this program was watched by...
family program.
It was a family program, and very popular with church people who would come home from church just in time to sit down and watch My Line, hear the news, and go to bed. So we had an enormous audience of the very best people in the United States. And they resented Hal Block. He had a habit of the show always watching a telephone number and leering at her, and he even got up once and chased a pretty girl across the stage like Harpo Marx used to.
No.
He thought it was funny.
Yeah.
And it was because of his desire to shine and be funny. He was the comic. He sat at the end seat next to Daly, and he was the one who made the jokes. And gradually I began to put in some of my awful puns and jokes, and Hal became very unnecessary. And they warned him several times about that. In fact, John Daly invented the trick of pulling his earlobe, which meant stop this line of questioning, because sometimes, inadvertently, we would get on thin ice. And also, Arlie and I were rather mischievous and would sometimes deliberately ask questions in an innocent way that we knew darn well we shouldn't have asked. For instance, one time we had a diaper salesman on, and we knew damn well we had a diaper man on, but it was very quickly established. And I asked, does your work cover a large territory? Well, that brought a scream of laughter. And of course I knew exactly what I was doing. I looked very innocent. Arlene was a great one at asking some seemingly innocent question that had double meaning. Because she's so charming, she got away with murder. We'd get warnings every once in a while from CBS. And also when I dragged in some name of a book, which I managed to do, or the name of some personal friend, I'd get angry letters. I had a wonderful opportunity, see, when the lady came from Cleveland. I'd mentioned 3 Cleveland bookstores while I was questioning. And of course, all you had to do was mention a name of somebody on a program like that. It just tickled people to death. I get a letter from people, I heard you, and that was very cute of you. I also get a letter from CBS, we told you not to use these names. But it turned out they began to realize that people liked it, what I'd, having lectured in these cities, if somebody came from Cleveland, if I mentioned the Halley Brothers store or the Higbee's or the name of the big hotel or the name of the biggest factory, and I knew what products came from these big cities, and became very knowing. And also, it soon turned out I was the only one who followed sports very closely. So if they ever had a sports figure on, I had to be the one to guess it, a baseball player, a golf player, or whatnot. We gradually got our departments down. Dorothy Kilgallen knew every jazz artist and all the swingers around town because she went to all the nightclubs. That was part of her beat on her columning. And Arlene knew everybody in the theater from the time of Noah. And so she was great at recognizing voices on the mystery guest. And so when we got rid of Hal Block...
How did that occur?
They fired him. he finally been warned once too often, and he made some very unfortunate remarks, thinking he was being funny. It was very vulgar, and letters came pouring in, people saying, get rid of him, he doesn't fit in. This was a class program. Even though it was a little game, we spoke English, which is rather unusual in television. and the program had a very, when it went off last year, CBS has gotten bushels of mail, college people and faculties, and I think they were crazy to throw the program off because it slipped. It wasn't in the top 10 anymore because the young kids don't watch these game shows, but it had a special audience, and I think it'll be revived someday. By that time we'll be so old they'll have to wheel us out. But
well, who took over Block's place then?
Somebody unknown named Steve Allen. And
how did they pick him?
He was doing a night sheet, just a local show at night, like a predecessor of the Tonight Show, and for Knickerbocker beer. And he introduced a lot of people, Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet. There were a lot of stars of the day. It started with Steve Allen, and he was fine, and he was on for a while. And then he went to California because he got a big show of his own. And then he was replaced, to our absolute delight, by one of the great men of show business, Fred Allen.
Oh, yeah.
And Fred Allen was on What's My Line panel for about 3 years. And oh, what a wonderful man. What a wonderful man. While he was on, the whole of What's My Line was a love affair. All Arlene and John and Fred Allen and I were close personal friends. Dorothy was always the outsider, for a couple of reasons. One, none of us liked her politics. She was a Hearst girl, and she had a different set of ideas than we did on Senator McCarthy and several other key problems. We just didn't think alike. But what was the worst part about Dorothy was she was always a reporter. And we began to discover that things we would talk about in that dressing room, clowning around before the show, would begin popping up in Dorothy Kilgallen's column. And we didn't like that. And the finale of that came once when John Daly came in a rage to the dressing room because he was very arbitrary, John. And he really ran that show and was, I think, largely responsible for its great success. He was a marvelous MC. And they couldn't do anything that he didn't approve of. When they tried any stunts, John said, absolutely not. This is the show where it's going to stay this way. I remember one night we had a sword swallower, and she brought a sword with her. And when we guessed her, we did too, by some miracle. I said, gee, I'd like to see you swallow a sword. I'd like to see it close up. I'd like to see some trick to it. And John wouldn't let her. He said, that's not What's My Line. I want to see it go to a circus, right on the air. And she had the sword with her, but he wouldn't let her do it. But this night he was very angry. Every once in a while John would go into a great snip, and people would run when he got angry. The reason was that that week a gangster out in California had been exposed, a fellow named Mickey Cohn. I don't know whether you remember it or not. And there was a big stew about it. And he had been interviewed on television by Mike Wallace. And got great attention because at this time he was about the leading gangster in the country, at least in publicity. And Mike Wallace's interview with him got national attention. So they'd gotten Mike Wallace for the mystery guest. And John said, I like Mike, I have nothing against him, but I'm not going to have him on this week because the reason they asked him on this week was because he was mixed up with this gangster. And he said, I think that brings down the level of What's My Line. I think he's crazy. We all thought he was, but he felt very strongly. He said they can have Mike Wallace another time if they want him. He's well enough known. He had his own show and was very popular. But he said this week he's not going to go on because of that gangster interview. Well, at that time, it was rumored, there was a rumor going around that Mike Wallace was going to replace John Daly as the head of ABC News. So some people, nasty people, thought that may have been partly the reason that John didn't want him, because he'd heard these rumors. Dorothy went and called up the Journal American and gave them the story. And Monday it was on the front page of the Journal American. John Daly never forget